So what about if we are in a simulation? If we are a hologram, and if life is computer generated, and you and I are computer generated avatars, it looks like it's that way. How do you make the transition between being a person of matter as opposed to a hologram? It's hard. It is. So when you think about matter and spirit, the life in the matter, are they separate or are they the same? Would matter exist without spirit? I don't think so. And if they're separate, then yes, they would exist, and we are the consciousness or the energy. But I believe that everything is alive and everything has consciousness. 99% of the world, they say, is plasma. And so there's no emptiness. There's no void. And the way I understand it, now I could be terribly wrong because I'm a novice that's just hungry to learn. But so is this a chair? Is it? Or is it a chair because I see it? You know Schrodinger's cat, right? That it's not there if we don't see it. And matter is constantly in flux, in movement, like you and I, like everything. Nothing ever stays the same. Nothing is ever static, right? Static, is that? I think that's the right word. Static should be, Anyway, nothing is ever like permanent. Everything's always moving. Everything. And when you think about that, our cells, and our organs replace themselves on a regular basis, depending on where they are, and the instructions for those particular cells, which I believe comes from the bacteria in the interstitium. And so, putting all that together, are we biologic or are we information generated? And it only makes sense to me that we're both. Because if we're information generated, then the information is generating the biology. And I think we've had it all wrong. I think that we've been treating organs when the organs are ever changing, so it can't be the organ. It has to be what feeds the organ, or the microbiome, or the bacteria. And when I was asking AI about that, does the solar affect the human body? And it said no. And so I pegged it. They were talking about cells. And so I said, does the solar affect our bacteria? Yes. And the electricity, it's electricity. It's energy that's affecting our bacteria. Because our energy is bacteria. Bacteria has to have energy. It carries energy to be. Right? If it didn't have energy, it wouldn't be. Anyway, so we know that matter moves constantly. And so do we generate the matter? by just the fact that we see it. That's hard to imagine because that stool is there tomorrow and I can look out the window and see it. Would it be there if I didn't look out the window? Well, David would look out the window and see it, right? Okay, so we know that our cells are replaced, that matter moves, and that our feelings are fickle. That's one thing that's always helped me, is to realize that our feelings are very fickle. For a long time, I disallowed them. And in some ways that was great, and in some ways it wasn't. I became pretty darn stoic and never thought about considering someone else's feelings because feelings didn't matter. And that's caused problems for me. I'm just realizing it as we're talking here that so many people say I don't hear them. And I think I just probably deny their feelings and try and get right to the root of whatever problem there is because I'm a fixer. But okay, back to the point. So feelings are fickle. So thinking of those things in a simulated reality, think about, we know that the mirror image works. It's the gateway process in so many ways. It's a meditation. The gateway process is the thing that the BHZ. I'm trying to do the letter before what I'm trying to say because they won't let it on if I say what I mean. But anyway, what the admin hid and about time travel and that kind of thing. So think about the mirror, and we know, do you remember in the 80s, the name it and claim it, when you just look in the mirror and say, I am great? Well, it didn't work. Most of us would look in the mirror and say that, I'm great, but then we go out and act just like we always had. But the word visualization really means to visit with. So if we can see a thing and create it, that's the mirror image. But you just can't see it one minute and the next minute see something contrary or different. You've got to, visualization means to visit with. So you've got to become one with that thing that you're seeing in the mirror. So we can look in the mirror and I can look in the mirror and see a 72-year-old woman that's been around the block, or I can look in the mirror and see a 72-year-old woman that's intelligent and curious and full of life. So we can create. And so many times in my life, I've seen that happen. And my granddaughter taught me that early on. She had this vivid imagination. And she would say it and it would happen. I mean, to the point where she was in American Idol contest and she called her mom and said, take off that day. And her mom did because she knew that Ashley had that mirror image thing going for her. She had aced that. And she's been really successful ever since. We all have that ability. Now, think about this. I need some water so badly. David, would you bring me some water? Would you bring me some water? I'm sorry. My mouth's so dry. In the 90s, in Self magazine, Harvard talked about putting two groups of women in separate rooms. Each group of women were highly monitored for, I think it was maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks. And each group were challenged to build their leg muscles. The one group were wired and were told not to move their leg muscles at all. And the other group were wired and were told not to move their leg muscles, but to meditate a certain way on the muscle becoming bigger. I think that was it. Anyway, it's been a while since I read it, but the point being, at the end of this experiment, guess who had the biggest muscle increase? The meditators. We can see a thing and have it happen. I know that's true with different things in my life, like plants. You can pretty much call them up into being. And I know that's true with just different miraculous things that have happened to me. With my partner and best friend, and this very spiritual man coming to see us. And when we met, we all fell to the floor and never moved. And what was that? Was it God? Well, okay, if it was God, then God also causes children's death and cancer and men to be cruel and earthquakes. So you can't have it one way or the other. And I think I can see every single reason for believing that we live in an informational reality. What are the other ways? Why do I think that? Well, I know I studied death and dying and spirituality in the 80s, and I was a student and teacher of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was, I think there's a woman, Brene something, that kind of teaches the same kind of thing as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did. But Elizabeth listened to people who were dying and came up with some understanding of what happened and the process and how to grieve and all kinds of incredible things, how to make sense out of suffering and all that. But okay, I remember her. And then Bernie Siegel, who was a doctor, a cancer doctor, and saw that the people who healed were the people who could see their healing. And he had one patient that they thought miraculously healed, and the woman said that she saw this Pac-Man eating cancer cells every day. She just talked about it. She said, oh, the Pac-Man's just eating up those bad cells. And they did. Okay, more. Physiology. They proved, and I don't have the details, but I can find them, and so can you, the physiology of someone expecting a piece of mail, and they don't know if the mail's going to be good or bad. It could be telling them about a death, or it could be telling them about a wedding, right? The person's physiology, their breath rate, their heartbeat, all that is different when it's positive as opposed to when it's negative. When they experimented, people knew before getting the mail, whether it was positive or negative. Yeah. Okay. And then I'm trying to think, there was also a different experiment that was just done recently about knowing, I just saw this week, about knowing what's going to happen before it happens. How much free will do we have? And that has to be a part of this whole, are we simulated? Is this a simulated reality? Right? Because we think we have free will. Why? Because we were told we did, just like every other damn thing. If they tell us, we'll believe it. Like Columbus coming to America and discovering it and all that malarkey. And all the whole time they're telling us he really didn't, but saying that he did. And like the Indians being called Indians, and they weren't from the Indies. But we call them that. It's a crazy world. Because I think whatever people put into the world is what they get back. It's a feedback loop. And I can see period cycles of my life that would be like that, and that would also substantiate the fact that we are, and everything in us and everything around us, everything we are, is a cycle. So that goes right there with all that, right? Because it's a feedback loop of information. This, to me, in the past week, changes how I see everything. I've been onto the simulation theory or the information theory for probably the last 5 years, because I was one of the first students of Doug Vogt, who wrote about that in Reality Revealed in 77. And so I knew all about that, although, I didn't have a good foundation for grasping it. Coming from a Christian background, and whatever we are fed is based on keeping us from knowing that. And if you look at Hollywood, if you look at admin, they know it. And they've used it, the mirror thing. They understand the reality of it. And we have been left behind because we've bought the narrative, and most of us have been too lazy to question or look. We just figure, okay, there are a number of religions out there, and we either are bred into one, or we take one at a low point, or one just makes sense to us, or all our friends are one, and so it's a social thing. But we never question our spirituality or our religious part of it, the foundational part. What rules us, we don't question it, and we should, because, like, for instance, the Bible is so contradictory and not written by who they say, and on and on and on. And so we should understand that this world is not what we've been told. I think that we can call things into existence. And I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's something for everybody, but I do believe that we can learn to harness and use the energy we have through the information that we are able to understand. And more that's becoming so clear to me, because everything is one in another. It's one in one, a cell, in a group of cells, in an organ, in a body, in a family, in a clan, in a heritage, in a country, in a biology, in a universe, in a multiverse. It's just over and over. And I was just planting some seeds, and I loved watching it germinate. And it germinates from nothing. Just a spark of perfect conditions. Because in that seed has to be instructions. And under the perfect conditions, that seed is perfected. And when you think about entanglement, I know I'm getting off on it, but entanglement, or spooky action at a distance where things happen, it makes sense to me because all things are created twice, right? We think a thing and we see it in our mind, and then we might build it or walk into it or, whatever. But it has to be created twice. And so entanglement is that theory, right? And if that's true, then this meditation on our legs would be the thought and the embodiment. Anyway, I know I'm getting saying more than what I really wanted to, but how are you thinking about where we might be and how to use it? That's what's exciting to me, because I've studied the greats and this changes everything. I remember finding out I loved C.S. Lewis. Of course, anybody who's intellectual and is in religion goes that way. And then I found out that he was one of the creeps that sold himself out. He knew the truth, because the truth is all over the Ivy League colleges if somebody wants to find it and dig into it. And there's enough. And then, unless you're going to totally disown everything written before Constantine, and then you add all the weather, all the catastrophes that were going on during certain religious events, like when Constantine, what he did, what was going on in the climate, and compare those things, which they try and keep you from ever doing. Compartmentalization forever rules what we see. At any rate, I think that's it. Thanks for hanging in there with me. We're going to figure some things out. I got a hankering